incentive is as often a killer as it is anything else. So that the question, can we do better than a profit motive-driven society, is a very good, healthy, and honest question. And banishing it is somewhere between stupid and evil.
You have an elite that severs themselves from reality. Remember that the oligarchs who now control both our financial and political system don't live in America. They live in a bubble of their own creation. A New Yorker writer called it Richistan. There's no check.
Support the cancel culture, the cosmopolitan elite. They want to destroy this country and everything that we have fought for and hold dear. They want to steal your liberty, your freedom. They want to control what you see and think, so that they can control how you live.
Incentive is as often a killer as it is anything else. So that the question, can we do better than a profit motive-driven society, is a very good, healthy, and honest question. And banishing it is somewhere between stupid and evil.
You have an elite that severs themselves from reality. Remember that the oligarchs who now control both our financial and political system don't live in America. They live in a bubble of their own creation. A New Yorker writer called it Richistan. There's no check.
They want to destroy this country and everything that we have fought for and hold dear. They want to steal your liberty, your freedom. They want to control what you see and think, so that they can control how you live.
How you doing?
I'm. Can you not hear me? I'm right here.
Yeah, we don't see you.
Okay.
Well, just talk until
Um.
we can see you.
Okay. I just watched the intro over again. Oh, okay. Well, you know what? I'll go on just like this. Hey guys, this is Antonio. Thanks for joining us at the Environmental Coffee House. I'm here with Paul Maginley. Tonight we're going to focus on a special narrative, given the times that we're all currently living in, times of COVID-19, times of wildfires and hurricanes, and possibly the greatest economic depression that our country has ever seen. So we'll focus on this theme that the United States, America, has failed the average American. My guest, Paul, from the Reality Report, will highlight many of the pathologies that he sees that underlines the failure in American society, how we got here, where we're going. So with no further ado, Paul, please. Looking at the United States today, what is the outlook?
Thanks, Tony, and thanks, Sandy. That's a wonderful intro you gave us. Very nice intro. You know, Tony, you posted something on Facebook weeks ago. I think it had something to do with, I don't remember the exact quote, something like, what can we say about a nation that deserts its own people in the face of a pandemic? The fact that we don't provide universal health insurance coverage for our citizens in time of a pandemic. And I was thinking about this, and it led me to re-examine what America's about. And the only conclusion I could arrive at, your picture still is not showing whatever reason there, Tony, but that America is a country about the few. It is not a country that represents the many. It represents the few. Now, this is not going to be earth-shattering headlines to anybody, but it's quite clear. Now, so how do we? It's a country that supports an oligarchic few. So I think Sandy's intro fit very well into what we're talking about tonight.
Absolutely.
Now, how can they get away with this? I mean, the thing is, how does a nation of roughly 350 million people allow or political and economic forces to be totally captured, dominated by the hands of the few and the corporations? We allow it because we fall for a lie. Okay, the lie basically can be summarized as this: that we are protected by the strongest military in the world, who defends us against enemies that don't really exist, in order to protect freedoms that we don't have. We only imagine we have them. What am I talking about? Well, there's no social mobility. We put up with this system. We put up with this political and economic system because we're under the misguided delusion that we've got a shot of reaching those exalted, that exalted group of the few. I'm saying that we probably have a better chance of making the NBA, an NBA team, than we do of cracking into the into that group of elite. And Americans really believe this, Tony. I say, otherwise we'd all have our pitchforks out, because there is no social mobility in this country, and both our political system and our economic system all work towards preventing that any chance of a social mobility. And here we are in a political cycle. We've got the elections coming up, and I don't see any relief coming from either candidate. And but then I never expected really to get any relief from that end.
But Paul, and let me just say even right there, because I think that Paul.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay. Sorry, I'm watching. There's some lag there, but I just want to say I think it's a good point to kind of think about there. So I think there's a historical story maybe behind how we got here. We're in a situation right now where, as you said, we have supposedly what are supposed to be opponents in a contest for the president of the United States, the Democrat Joe Biden and the Republican Donald Trump becoming president. And yet, most of America, that is to say the majority of Democrats, obviously almost the entirety of independents, and even the majority of Republicans, these are voters, feel that the country's in turmoil, that we have lost our way. But the population only grapples with this kind of emotionally. And you see these visceral reactions in the streets, right? A lot of this is, particularly on the left, organic and very loose and not organized. The right has always been historically organized. So I think it's important as we look at what's happening today, we understand that this is really a historical phenomenon. I mean, you have some very serious, important questions. I mean, America is really, I think, dominated, our narrative as Americans is dominated by a mythos. And this mythos is meant to really program the average American to diffuse them against the truth of the economic inequity that lives in our society, that dominates our society, that controls our society. And you say, well, how is this allowed to happen? The mythos is strong because you have a situation where racism is prevalent. So you have an underclass of white Americans who are, as you say, locked out of this elite group. They're locked out the powers of sin, the centers of power. But yet what empowers these forgotten Americans is racism itself. And so you'll see that there's these type of enclaves, these techniques of social diffusion that run rampant in our society that kind of disables the working class. And, I want to do away with this term, middle class. I never really much like that term. It's actually a very illusory term. If you work to live, you are working class, regardless if that's for $25,000 or $250,000 a year. But you have this system where we are divided amongst our race, we are highly divided amongst our class, stratified in such a way that it really, like I say, diffuses any type of collective understanding of the crisis. And so we experience it in this hyper identity politic fashion. But I mean, look, we don't see any political economic alternatives other than what's coming from the Bernie Sanders side.
Yeah. And if you look back in history, I mean, you know, it was just by the skin of our teeth that we got Teddy Roosevelt, who busted the trust. I mean, it took the assassination of a seated president for Teddy Roosevelt to get into power, who was one of the first presidents to actually work upon reducing the power structure. And I mean, I think if we look back on our history, it's really quite simple. I mean, we exploited the American Indians to such an extent that they were virtually wiped out. We have a very small population left living under unpleasant circumstances. Then we, of course, exploited the labor of imported Africans, which lasted generations, long after slavery had been abolished. Long after that, we exploited children in the workforce. We exploited women. We exploited immigrants. We are now exploited undocumented aliens. We are exploiting now basically the majority of the American people. Ours is a brand of capitalism that feeds on itself, that is anthropophagous, that is cannibalistic. That is the kind of economic system we have. And of course, there's no real call to seriously amend it in any way. That any candidate, any person that does, is marginalized as some kind of communist or socialist. And in the end, we just have, the two candidates, the two parties that basically are bought. And now it's reaching, I think, critical mass. I mean, after World War II, America had a surge of popularity as their industries dominated the world, and therefore they could make some concessions towards creating a middle class. But that's all those international circumstances have changed. And now in a very competitive international world, it's gone back to where we are eating our own people. And this has been going on for some time. So again, why do we put up with it, Tony? I mean, I'm thinking it's because of that lie, what we term the American dream, that we too can make the NBA. It's not happening. It's just not happening.
And what I think, looking at the scene today, what's phenomenal is there is a positive story to think about, right? We do, us as a national entity, start off as a third world country, relatively speaking to Britain of the day or France. And it isn't really until the 20th century and after the Second World War. Think about that. Europeans had been on the American continent, in considerable numbers since at least 1600. And it's not until 1900, about 300 years later, 320 years later, that the United States really comes on the scene as a reputable power in the world. So there is a true story here that, and we're seeing it kind of replicated in fast forward in China. But there's a true story that as countries develop, they do prosper, and as they prosper, the general population doesn't actually see a lot of these excesses as well in terms of higher living standards. But this is actually conditional, right? It's not necessarily true that if you're a rich country, your population will be rich, right? In fact, we've seen across the third world that there are plenty of rich countries, but their populations remain poor. And in fact, some of those impoverished populations in the world. And what we're seeing in the United States is that we are losing our social contract, that struggle in this era. From Theodore to Franklin Roosevelt, realized that we had to contain the beast of capitalism. That's because the oligarchy of that day was so vicious, really sowed the seeds for the Depression. and then capitalizing off, of course, the Depression, while people are killing themselves in the street of New York and Philadelphia and so on. That's a sort of brutal system. And the people are eventually going to rebel and try to get it and subdue it to some sense, if not end it. And Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, understood this. And that's why, as he says very classically, we need a new deal, because the current one wasn't working for the people or for society.
Absolutely. I mean, we're going to have to overturn everything. What I'd like to ask is, what is a nation of 350 million people which supports a very small oligarchy? What is it? Are we a nation, or are we just a collection of people of different cultures, races, beliefs, and so on? In other words, if we are a nation, then it's the idea is to support the welfare of the majority of as many people as possible.
And Paul, I think I don't want to interrupt, but I want to say that I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. And maybe it is because I'm a Negro American, I see it so plainly, but I've always viewed the United States as a plantation. And that's exactly what you see. That's exactly
our economic system is a plantation system. That's exactly what it is, where we exploit, we cannibalize our own people. That's what we are. So is the answer for us to break up, that we break into regions? Because all I see here is 350 million people, the vast majority under great economic duress and social duress. That's all I'm seeing, while a very small number are continually benefiting, and who are represented by the halls of power. I mean, why do we put up with it? That's what I want to know. Why do we go through this political circus every election year? Why?
And Paul, I look at this and obviously I'm younger than you, and I will be honest that the actual repetition of this cycle, right? And it obviously gets worse every 4 years. At least that has been true in my lifetime. The creatures that come out of the commercialized political machine are really. I mean, I'm like I said, I'm not a Christian. I don't have Christian values, but I think about these figures as truly demonic, right? They're demonic in the sense that they're totally detached from the human reality on the ground, right? They are not at all beholden to the pain, the suffering that they're causing, that they're using, the exploitation that's going on. For them, a lot of them, people like Hillary Clinton, for example, it was just so true that you could see that this is a woman who sees the American people as chess pieces, game pieces on a game board. And it is sort of ruthless in the same way you see, for example, Wells Fargo. So this is, in my school, and I keep on bringing this up, Appalachian State University. At the same time that Wells Fargo was creating fake bank accounts, fake credit cards, without the permission of their customers' permission, and then charging those accounts and credit cards, in some cases, over $400,000. Okay? And that they were able to do this, tens of thousands of people.
And they got a wrist slap. That's what they got.
They didn't even get that, man. What they got, the CEO of Wells Fargo walked away with $255
golden
million.
Parachute.
So you can't, and you talk about someone like Freddie Gray, who's selling cigarettes in the same damn city, ends up getting gunned down by the New York police. So you think about that in terms of inequity, right? It's in your face. It's there for everybody to see, but there is a delusion, right? Because for some reason, people in America see the CEO of Wells Fargo as entitled to his earnings, even though he got them illegally. But right, it is because the wealthy in the society are highly conscious of their wealth, right? The rich in our society are highly conscious of their class position, and they are doing everything they can with their resources they have, money, to secure and maintain that class position. And part of that is, I mean, again, historical. In the United States, 1675, 75% of the U.S. population could not vote. Okay, that means only 25% of the U.S. population could vote. Well, at the time, 83% of the population was white. So that means the vast majority of white people in the United States couldn't vote. You know, this has always been, as you say, Paul, a society that was catering to the rich and wealthy. Who the hell is George Washington, Thomas Franklin? I mean, Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin. These are all rich, wealthy white men.
But Tony, maybe they could get away with it when people actually believe the myth of the American dream. But I think this has been pretty much it's been pretty much demolished now, right?
No, I wanted to push back on that. President Barack Obama realized something, and it was really profound. And he said that really we're undergoing a sort of super internationalism. And the world is governed by, so now it's not just a plantation in the United States, but plantation Earth. Because, of course, we exported our system to the rest of the world. But you know, Obama was describing these super rich, elite, international, cosmopolitan types. And really, it's difficult for people to understand the levers of power now. They're so remote, so foreign to your average person. It's really difficult to see and recognize how to even attack these forces. And because, at least particularly in our American case, these forces have been so innovative and creative in the way they've diffused our collective sentiments, mainly through the race struggle, right? It actually turned about 1700, the United States starts to really ramp up, or excuse me, not 1700s, but the 1800s, the United States starts to really ramp up its importation of slaves. Why? Because throughout the 1600s, throughout the 1700s, the indentured white population was largely unable to be a part of the political system. And the way they responded to that was open rebellion.
Because our economic system is based on the exploitation of the many. Now, you know, I want to emphasize that the problem is not just our political system, but our economic system. I mean, the thing with America is that, I mean, I was staying in a restaurant. I was looking out. We were in a strip mall, and I kind of took an unofficial mental poll of which of those shops, business owners, small business owners would likely survive COVID. And I was watching, granted it was early in the morning, and for some of them, they hadn't opened yet, but some of them had. And I was thinking one was a Korean-owned laundromat. And I suspect that Korean-owned laundromat can survive a year of no business. I'm not so sure that could be matched by some of the other businesses, and I think it's because, and I don't want to be stereotypical here, but chances are they haven't branched off into many different laundromats, that they have quite a bit saved. They probably own their equipment and so on. The problem with the American system is no matter what you have, you are expanding. If you made 20% growth this year, you must make another 20% next year. This is the growth of a cancer cell, that it's growth, 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 and therefore economically you're always on the ledge, that you're always one recession, one depression away from total collapse, that no matter how successful you've been, one shop isn't enough. You've got to go and franchise the darn thing and just keep growing. You lend, Therefore,
Well,
economically,
I'll say
we are
this.
all on the ledge. That is the problem with our economic system, that nobody's satisfied with what we have. And Tony, today with, climate degradation, this concept of continual growth, economic growth, I mean, it's toxic. And it's toxic both to our own welfare and also to the welfare of our ecology as well.
Well, right. The system, as you say, it doesn't only exploit people. It doesn't only exploit us by our race and our sex and our age, and it exploits the planet. I mean, obviously, the planet is the biggest loser in our economy. When we think about what an economy is fundamentally, an economy is nothing more than the collection of transactions, exchanges of transactions, and our economy, you think about it, obviously it was born in a world where we didn't have, first of all, we didn't have an advanced understanding of human rights. Well, actually we did. I'll be honest, we did have an advanced understanding for white human rights, white male human rights. But, in the story, I think people have to understand, at least the highlights in America to me have actually been when the underdogs have won, right? America was made better by the abolishment of slavery through the Civil War. America was made better through the Civil Rights Movement. America was made better through the women's rights movement. America was made tremendously better. We forget this in our history, and we don't forget it. We purposely keep this out of our history. But America has been made tremendously better because of our socialist history, because of the men and women who died for your rights as Americans, not to have your children devoured in industrial machinery. So, we forget to thank those Americans, it is Labor Day, who gave their lives at the Haymarket riot, who gave their lives to, it's funny that we think about police brutality in terms of only against blacks, but throughout American history, whites were there too, but they were the poor working whites. Police were overwhelmingly put in major cities, putting down strikers. That's our history. Our history is made and forged in blood. It's forged in Native American blood. It's forged in black blood. It's forged in poor white blood. The only blood we know it's not forged in is white rich blood. Why? Those are the people in power. Now, overwhelmingly in the modern era, it's becoming increasingly international, right? So we're starting to see more people of color, but the overall class system remains. And after all, this has been from the beginning a class war. And now, as you say, Paul, the war is against the planet itself. And that's the nature of this system. This system is at war with humanity, and this system is at war with the planet.
Absolutely. And it's time to scale back. Scale back. That we have the financial resources. It's that they're just gathered in the hands of the few right now. We need a universal basic income. And it's time to scale back to save our planet and to save our people. Because right now we're just not a nation of 350 million people, but a ragtag collection of misguided 350 million people. That's what we have right now.
We're a plantation of 350 million people.
Yes.
And you're right, Paul. The choices before us today is who's going to be the new plantation master. And I think you're right to say that the hell with that, it's time to get off the plantation.
Right. There's no answers in that direction in the political arena right now. There's no real answers here.
And in this day and age, it's a suicide. What we're seeing today, in real Durkheimian terms, is a sort of collective social suicide. And that is why, in part, I cannot take part in what's happening in the United States on the national scene. We should be embarrassed of ourselves that we've allowed our social culture to degenerate in such deranged madness as to even allow Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump to grace the stage of the presidency, and then of course now in this zombie-esque rerunning of that in 2020. It's absolutely a shame. Like I say, it's absolutely phenomenal that we're living in a pandemic and healthcare is the only thing that's not been offered.
That's the thing, Tony. I mean, that is where it all comes down to. If anybody needed any proof this year that to show that we are just a collection of 350 disconnected and financially unconnected people, it's the fact that in the middle of a pandemic, the majority of Americans do not have access to health care. I mean, there it is right there, the most damning statistic.
And not only that, we have.
And we are to focus ourselves on a sham of election. Is that what we're supposed to focus on?
And think about this. So not only do we have a system that leaves 40 million Americans completely uninsured, another 40 million, and these are even rough numbers. We really don't, I mean, after the Republicans have gone after the Republican Obamacare, it's hard to say, but let's say that 80 million people fall under the category of uninsured and underinsured. And then you just had another 32
million, yeah.
And then you had another 32 million people lose their health care during the pandemic crisis. Think about that. So we're at over 100, and we're almost near 110 million people who have loose health care, if that at all, in our system. A third of the population is a third of our population. And we have a candidate. Oh, actually, we have two candidates. We have two candidates from the major national parties. Not only refuse, but condemn universal health care during a pandemic. I mean, you really, like I say, there's almost something demonic about a spirit that would, during a pandemic, say, not only are we not looking at health care, universal health care guarantee.
It's not even on the table. It's not even on the table.
They've gone after it. That's a crazy, ludicrous, pie in the sky idea. How dare you bring that up during a serious talk? And what have we seen? Premiums for healthcare in the United States have skyrocketed. I work for people who have intellectual developmental disabilities, and one of our people had to get an ambulance ride, and I'm on the phone with the operator asking, is the ambulance in network? That's an absolutely ridiculous question to be asking when someone's having a healthcare emergency. Those are the type of questions you have to ask in the United States. You have to ask, is your ambulance in network? You have to ask, is your anesthesiologist in network? You have to ask, is your general? I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous in the United States that we settle even during a time of crisis. And every other country knew what to do, right? Spain nationalized their hospitals, and they nationalized their healthcare system overnight. Mm-hmm. That's the type of rapid, no nonsense, no monkey business response to a pandemic that countries that are societies. And I think you're really begging the question, Paul. Are we a society?
No, we're not a society. In fact, the number one cause of bankruptcy, personal bankruptcy, is healthcare costs. And most of them have health insurance. Most of the people on food stamps are working Americans. Okay, so that tells you the whole system is rotten from the inside out. Most people, let me repeat, most people on food stamps are working Americans. Most people who go bankrupt for healthcare costs have healthcare at work. I mean, again, it's what are we running here? This plantation is time for the people to rise up.
But it's so, and again, that's a devastating. And I hate sharing facts like that about the country because they're so, and I don't like to curse, goddamn devastating, right? That you could have a system where the people who have health, we're not talking about the people who don't have health, but the people who have health care are going bankrupt. And the number one cause is their health care. I mean, so we're really that's out of control. So it's not only a system that's so inefficient that people are being left out there dying because they don't have health. We just saw from Yale, another study from Yale. This is out of control in the United States. Another study from Yale that 70,000 people a year. That's 70,000. 55,000 people, 58,000 people died in the Vietnam War. 70,000 people a year in the United States die due to a lack of health care insurance. It's not that we don't have the hospitals. It's not that we don't have the doctors. It's not that we don't have the medicines. We don't have the money.
Right.
Or at least that's what they say. But that's the reason why people are literally dying 70,000 at a time in the United States on a yearly basis. And this is a public health crisis.
And so we are to plot our lives based on a jackpot system. In other words, not a system that's designed to favor favor the many, but to favor the very few who can actually make the NBA team. In other words, a jackpot type of society. That's it. Either you win the jackpot or you don't, or you join the many minions who struggle for a basic existence. We've turned into a banana republic. After the great economic benefits America garnered after World War II, we've become an absolute banana republic. Oh, Tony's taking a break, so I'll continue.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, and we have a people that accept this kind of jackpot mentality. That yes, if I buy a scratch off, I've got a chance of winning the big one, and then I can join those few elites, and therefore I support the system, or I at least go along with it passively.
But people, I think, are more rational than that. I genuinely do believe when I see a lot of my white conservative Southern friends here in North Carolina, I really do believe that they have a sense that if you work hard in America, then you can and will succeed. And I think to some degree, right, that's not totally fiction. In fact, I have a mother who actually is a perfect example of that story, and she's obviously Black. But I have a graph that I wanted to show everybody to get a sense of what we're talking about, that this era of capitalism that we're in is really a particular era of capitalism that has been most vicious. It's actually very reminiscent of the Gilded Age, so roughly 1880 to about the Great Depression. But this chart shows the difference right around the Great Expansion into the age of the modern era. And as you can see here, throughout the last 100 years, starting at a baseline of 1947, or excuse me, the last 80 years, you can see that really wages, wealth in this country, the economy was growing in tandem, right? So this has always been a vicious economy, right? We talked about those historical realities with indigenous populations, the Blacks and underclass whites. But it was really in this period, the New Deal era, where we tamed this lion, right? And you saw that the wealth of all classes were steadily rising with productivity. But what ended up happening during 1980 is that reality was replaced with a sort of fiction. And came a movie star from Hollywood, Ronald Reagan. And the notion that the government is the problem. And remember, in the United States, the government is supposed to be of the people, for the people, by the people. The government is supposed to be the people. So Ronald Reagan comes in with a very anti-American thesis that the people, the government is the problem. That what we need to do is let private industry run wild.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And what happens when private industry runs wild is that one of the things that they immediately do in our society is cut costs. And there are two types of costs that are typically outside of their will to cut: the cost of taxes, the cost of labor. And so, so they have their business operations, and they can, be a more efficient business and cut costs that way. But then there's these two other measures, taxes and through cost of labor. And when they took over the political system, they were able, obviously, to levy taxes off of themselves. We saw that in the Trump era in terms of $1 trillion tax cut, absolutely historical, phenomenal, and actually American history. We haven't seen tax cuts like this before. And then, of course, there is the cutting of wages, right? And one way that we cut wages in the United States is simply not to raise them. And so inflation over time erodes away wage. I mean, we're still in the United States. We're supposed to be a first world country. We are still paying people legally $7.25 an hour in 2020.
It's a joke. And going along with the Reagan 1980, I agree with you. That was a watershed moment, because it was at that stage that both political parties started to move away from the old New Deal type of mentality. Because you look at Republicans prior to that, Eisenhower, even Nixon, they were still under the New Deal type of mentality. It was Reagan who overturned all of this, and who started to chip away at the social safety nets. Business itself, as you mentioned, went into cost cutting. And then it was a famous CEO. His name was Jack Welch. I think was he Procter & Gamble? I can't remember. But he came up with the then novel idea of actually cutting costs for a company that was already profitable. In other words, a lot of the CEOs were making unpleasant cuts because their companies weren't doing very well, and they felt it was a necessary series of cuts. Now, Neutron Jack Welch came up with the idea of, hey, let's do it. Even though our company is doing extremely well, we'll make cuts to do even better. Again, this toxic notion of whatever success you have, that you are somehow obligated to make much more the following year, to expand even further. And this has caused this cancerous division of growth into something that has impoverished the most of the nation, and has impoverished the environment. Again, so this Neutron Jack Welch, one of the great villains, I think, economic villains of history, who is actually lauded by the Wall Street community. He was one of the great innovators at that time, who, again, came up with the concept of cutting, cutting in order to make an already extremely profitable company even more profitable.
And you can't forget people like Lewis Powell, Justice with the Powell Memorandum, which comes after the crisis of democracy in '75, to the business community, warning them that hostile forces were making the business environment too unstable and unpredictable, too dangerous. And so Lewis Powell's memorandum, going out to the business community, organized the business community. So we saw finance, we saw big oil, big pharma, all the big ones come together and really capture the civic society. It's actually this term in the 1990s that was used called predatory capture. And this is where corporations would literally, they would hire people, lobbyists and other type of figures, to capture corporations. They capture corporations through political funding, donations. They'd be put on the heads of these committees, or the directorates of these committees and things like that. And they would capture these civic agencies. And they would, like a virus, like HIV captures a white blood cell to replicate itself to infect other cells. Well, that's exactly what these corporations do when they're allowed to run loose in the society. And so they captured the EPA, but they captured the EPA to loosen the grip of regulatory patterns in order to increase profit. And so you've seen this happen across the, really the FDA, the FCC, the EPA, whatever you want to call them. I mean, the whole alphabet has been crisscrossed by the corporations on this one. So yeah, it's exactly as Christopher Hedgens said it. We've seen a slow coup d'etat of our public civic society, and that's why it's so brutal. Corporations simply
on the altar of growth, Tony. I mean, on unquestionable growth. I mean, growth that cannot, it can never be satiated. It always must be more and more and more. I mean, we have to, I think, reevaluate all this.
Well, Paul, me and you, let's be honest. Me and you are both investors in the stock market, and that is a visual of the phenomena that we're talking about.
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously,
absolutely.
The hope there is that the economy will expand indefinitely, at least throughout our lifetime.
Well, let's point out, Tony, that many people talk about the disconnect between the stock market and Main Street, and this is absolutely correct, and that's because Wall Street represents large corporations. It doesn't represent small businesses on that strip mall. And
I will say this: I think that Wall Street. Well, think about. Well, let's just be honest. Let's just bring the statistics. Was it 10% of Americans own stock?
No. I think it's over 60% have some stock.
60% of Americans own stock.
Own some, yeah, through 401ks or whatever. Sure, we can check that.
90% of the stocks are owned by 10% of the population. I think.
Right.
So there you go. So the economy, the stock market, then is a representation of the top 10. And it certainly, I mean, that's obviously, in more pivotably, it's a representation of the hyper 1%.
55% of Americans own stock. So it's close.
Okay. So we're talking about 90% of the stock are owned by 10% of the population.
Right.
So there you go. You see, and that's why the stock market, people are so surprised to see the stock market doing so phenomenally well. I'm not at all. The top 10% of the United States is doing phenomenally well.
Yeah, and not just that, but it's the big corporations are doing just fine. I mean, Amazon's doing great. Tesla's doing great. I mean, these companies are doing just fine. It's not representative at all of. So again, here's this bifurcation of future. The few have a great future. I mean, but it's earned on the backs of the majority.
But that's the thing about
heading in the opposite direction.
That's the thing about societies. It is not the case that 10% of the population has a great future and 90% doesn't.
Well, long term, no.
When that becomes the case, that system collapses.
Right.
And so what we are, and I've argued this. We're not only undergoing collapse from the environmental crisis that is pending, but we have been in decline for, as that graph showed, the last 40 years. We've been steady decline. There are now more Americans who are considered low income, poor, or in poverty than there are in the so-called middle class. Education, which is supposed to be a hyper belt of social mobility, is completely inaccessible to people who are making less than $100,000 a year. A 4-year bachelor's at a public university in the United States. I mean, this has gotten out of hand. I mean, this is clearly, it's a playground. It is a playground for the rich. The United States.
You know what I just thought of, Tony? This whole concept of a middle class. It really appeared after World War II, where we had an industrial monopoly on the world because Europe was devastated and Asia was devastated by World War II. That the whole formation of a middle class was actually an accident. It was a special situation. therefore, it wasn't. It was an accidental byproduct of the war. It had nothing to do with our capitalist system, which created that middle class, and we've been proving it ever since as we chip into it. And
Well,
erode.
right. I mean, there's the whole story that Americans like to conveniently leave out. But up until the 1970s, the Russian economy was as productive as the United States. And throughout that period, there were moments where it was more productive than the United States. At the same time, we were going through our golden age. And that was, again, in response to the fact that Russia was able to capitalize off of the ending of the world wars.
Well, they also exploited their people. Don't forget, Tony, after World War II. I mean, with the intelligentsia was in gulags and.
Well, of course. Well,
that's how. But
it's not that there's one prevailing system that gets people rich, right? You can have a whole host of systems, like you say, it's the moment. These systems were there at the moment to get rich.
Yeah.
And they got rich, and they've done extraordinarily well. The United States is even in decline is extraordinarily well, at least for those populations that are able to achieve that type of excess wealth. But gross inequity and inequality is an erosion of democracy as well. So we're seeing at the same time, this system has brutalized Black people, brutalized Hispanics, brutalized poor whites, brutalized women, brutalized the environment. All this is coming ahead. And that's why you see this turmoil. And people know, even the people who are voting for Joe Biden, they know that the world, that their lives, that the country, their family, everything's still going to get worse.
Mm-hmm.
They can't determine that they're judging in the back of their head. Is it going to get 10 miles an hour slower worse or 100 mile an hour slower worse? They just know it's going to be, in their minds, a little less worse than what it currently is with Trump. But again, it's a setup, because this system, it's not about, you and I, because we're investors, are also, I think, long-term thinking people. It's not just about the year-to-year gains. It's about year after year after year after year. You compound that, annualized over 10 years, and you look at it that way. And 10 years out, Paul, this is gone. So people, this just does it. 10 years out, this system is gone. And there's no question about it. We're at such social derangement and disarray right now. President Obama is a total clown. And that's another feature, another demon, right? So he's actually supposed to be an angelic figure in the Black community, or at least two Blacks in the United States and minorities. But he's really a demonic figure, right? He's not come to free the slaves. He's come to castigate us, to de-weaponize us, to disarm us, and to really continue to pollute our minds with this idea of weight. That's the demon of Obama. He is the demon of incrementalism, the demon of waiting forever for a future that will never come. And he controls the population when he speaks this way. He told the NBA, yeah, I know you guys are protesting about people being murdered in the streets, but cut it out. And you see that type of, again, this is a system that doesn't care about humanity. Human lives do not matter in this system. No. You just cite them off. I mean, yeah, okay. If we have to put up a factory near a poor neighborhood and poison some people, you know what matters? You know why factories that poison people don't go up in rich neighborhoods? It's not because rich people's lives are inherently more valuable than poor people's lives. It's because rich people have the money,
the mobility themselves. They have the mobility to get out.
Well, but they also have the lawyers. They can get the lawyers and the lawsuits. Poor people can't do that.
By the way, you'll always find casinos too in the bad areas.
But you'll find casinos. You'll find ABC store. You'll find gun shops. That's what they do. This is a poisonous. This is a system from hell. Okay, it goes to the worst, the most desperate people. It puts a bottle of booze in their hands and a gun.
Yep. So, is there anything positive we can take out of this, Tony? I mean, what can we do? We don't want to be just, a negative Cassandra. Is there anything positive we can? What's the answer? I mean, again, my answer is scale down. We simply have to take away. We have to. We have to. I'm trying to think of the verb, but we've got to avoid the cancerous approach. Okay, which is the cancerous approach to growth, which is what we've adopted. We've got to scale back big time. And we've got the wealth. I've always said we should do confiscatory taxes, but I don't know what's going to bring that up.
The thing is, in this system, I don't understand. I guess because I'm just fundamentally different than the people who operate this system. But if I was in charge, or if I was, okay, let's say if this is a democracy, so let's say this is my view of the direction we should go, is that obviously we have a lot of resources, okay? They're distributed the wrong way. We should redistribute our resources more equitably, but also if there are less of us consuming at these rates, consuming the way that we do, then we would also have more resources per person as well into the future. So not just presently, but also into the future for future generations. This system isn't calibrated to understand how to live on Earth. This system is calibrated to understand how to raise profits on Earth. That's two different modes, okay? So what we have to do is get out of the system of profit making and get into a system of, well, first of all, we have to go through bio-restoration. So I think our economy needs to be underlining and dynamically driven to restore the biosphere. So we start valuing restoring ecosystems. And paying for that, as opposed to the things that we're doing to destroy the ecosystem. But again, it's hard because the culture is along with society, right? We don't have a culture that values nature, doesn't value. And we've had a culture, our whole history is trying to force our culture to value human life. Our whole history, American history, just summed up from the time that Europeans got here, has been a history of trying to value the whole of humanity. Okay? And I would say that for most of that history, as you just recorded, Paul, we've mostly failed at that, right? Well, Black people have been here for 420 years, 420, and well, it's like 416 years actually, but Black people have been here for that long, and most of that time we've been in bondage and total slavery, or under Jim Crow. And now, according to Michelle Alexander, the new Jim Crow. So we haven't even left the plantation. We've been in the plantation since we got here.
Absolutely. Now, I would say that one thing we could do is we're going to have to reevaluate the whole American concept that every individual has the right to own an automobile, and I'm saying this right to a stockholder of Tesla, but nevertheless, we need to reevaluate this. I mean, Henry Ford was the one who came out with the concept that, hey, let's make cars affordable and available to the average American. Now we have to rethink this and say, no, I mean, cars are just doing too much damage to the environment. And no, we need public transportation. And no, it's not the right of every American to own a vehicle. We've gone too far.
But
too far
what?
into
I do like Elon Musk. There is a solution there, or there is I won't say a solution. There's a helper there. There's a gap. I think that cars in themselves are not inherently wrong, right? It's scale. But they
represent, Tony, this unlimited desire for material wealth that really is made out of rare materials. What is becoming rare materials? Cell phones, for example. I mean, I'm using it kind of as a symbol, really, a catch-all.
Well, I mean, I see, but I think because there's a Pandora's box here, right? That with all these technologies, that is there something inherently wrong with them, or is it the scale at which that we have them, right?
Right.
Is it okay on a living planet to have cars at all?
Yeah, well,
Or
probably,
is it okay
but
to have up to only 500,000 cars instead
yeah,
of
yeah.
2
But the
billion?
point is, no, Americans are under the idea, the delusion that it's the right of every American to own a vehicle, a personal vehicle.
Well, we're
Which is
under
nonsense.
that
Which is
delusion,
nonsense
but where does
given
that
our population numbers and
right?
and the condition of our environment. It's nonsense.
But that delusion stems from the fact that every American believes it's our right to have as many children as we possibly can
That
bear.
too.
If that's what
Yeah.
we wanted to do. And if you have a society that believes in that I actually, it was really funny. When I was in college, I talked to a preacher or a pastor, whatever you want to call himself. And I asked him, how much do you think what's the carrying population of the planet? And he said the planet can hold how many ever humans that God is willing. So I said, so you think that there could be 1 trillion planets living, 1 trillion humans on the planet living at the current living standard that you do? And he's like, yeah, I don't think there's any problem with that. And I was just like, well, there you go. Humans are not able to understand exponential growth. We're not able to understand or fathom scale. And so people don't really understand that, there are 12 million people living in Los Angeles, and all those people are living as detailed lives as you are wherever you are. Okay. And then there's 1.3 billion people in China living as detailed lives as you are. And people just don't understand that all this activity, all this consumption, all of this usage, and then we just throw away things at mass scale that's absurd.
No, it's become untenable. By the way, Wells Fargo appreciates exponential growth, and they will do anything they can to achieve it. By the way, I have to make a correction. Neutron Jack Welch was CEO of General Electric, not Procter & Gamble. I'm an old man. I forget details.
Well, it's okay. It's okay. General Electric, gee.
Anyway,
one of the great industries in the industrial complex. Can't forget General Electric.
Yeah. So anyway, yes, I think that this we've sacrificed everything on the altar of exponential growth. That no matter what we produced this year, no matter what our successes were, we have to do X percent. I mean, just sit in any board meeting. I mean, I worked in banks where we'd go over the annual figures, and I could have had a banner year, but I had to produce 20% more because that was the goal for the following year. I mean, this is just pure nonsense.
I know that's
pure nonsense.
How maddening that is, that we live in a system where it's not good enough to be great. You literally have to continue to grow year after year.
Like I said, you were always on the ledge. You're just permanently dissatisfied, and that is the cancerous environment under which we labor under here in this country.
Well, think about that. So if you imagine you're a company, you're a car company, right? And you sell a historic 500,000 cars. Well, next quarter, your investors and everything else, the momentum of your business is expecting 500,020 cars or 500,000.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's like crazy that you. It's like it's not good enough to at least just like do another 500,000. Like you got to always up your last gain. You always got to make a new historic high. Yeah,
it's cancerous. And
you can't have a historic high forever. That's ridiculous.
But you know what? Tony, we're not slowing down. Nobody's doing it. Nobody's doing it. Nobody's going to do it.
We're speeding up, baby. That's
what the
Nobody's
whole
stock market is about. That's the speed up.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that's showing us. The stock market is basically a clock of destruction, and we're and we wrap it up, baby. We got record highs.
Yeah, well, at least I invest in medicines. Tony, you invest in cars.
So. Hey, they're electric. They're electric.
No, I'm teasing you, buddy. But anyway, we've got. I don't see anybody slowing down, and Guy McPherson used to love to quote Edward Albee that civilization was like a plane that has to keep moving forward in order to stay up in the air, and there's a lot of truth to that. Nobody's slowing down, at least not voluntarily. We're going to speed right to the end.
It's like I say, it's like a nuclear power plant, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't have a nuclear power plant remain in steady shutdown state. It always has to be running in the background. And if you ever turn it off, it'll explode. Actually, a lot of people don't actually realize this. Most of the heavy industrial sectors around the industrialized world are not just buildings. These buildings are actually just large machines that you can't ever turn off. And if you do turn them off, they'll vent like massive. That's like the U.S. economy, right? You can't slow down the U.S. economy or you'll cause a huge crash, right? You can't slow this baby down, and people will lose their jobs, people will lose their life. So you can't slow the baby down. So it's like
and business works on leverage, Tony, so that again, everybody's vulnerable. It doesn't matter how successful you were, as long as you're leveraged out, right? You're on the ledge. You're on the financial ledge. That's the problem. That it's always inherently unstable.
Well, just like you said, even if you're
two major shutdowns.
You have the best example of the world of that, Paul. Even if you have health insurance, you're on the edge. Even if you have health, even if you're insured, that's what insurance is supposed to be about. You're supposed to have insurance so you're not on the edge. Even if you have insurance, you're on the edge.
Right.
Most of the people who go bankrupt in the United States have insurance.
Right.
So this system is double rigged for people to lose. You lose if you win.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, just like most people on food stamps are employed, same thing. It's we are. You gotta laugh. What can you do?
It's sick.
You got to laugh. You got to laugh. It's such a joke. It's so absurd, and I don't know. I'm gonna laugh my way, I guess, to the end. I don't know. I'm trying to scale down as I age, but.
I mean, it's as sick as it can. I mean, it's a sick show. I mean, like I told you, it's demonic. You can't really determine that in any other way. That the vast majority of people who have health insurance go bankrupt through their health insurance. The vast majority of people who are on food stamps have jobs and work. I mean, you have a system and I worked in Boone. I was the chair of the Affordable Housing Task Force for the Boontown Council. I saw this firsthand. Okay, this was a small town, and this is what creates a lot of the rife in our society. A lot of the strife in our society. So what was happening in Boone is a small town in the mountains of North Carolina, where my school is located, Appalachian State University, my alma mater. It's I would say 99% white population, which is perfect because you can see all of the class dynamics, the economic dynamics at display without any of the racial disguise. And that was so eye-opening to me. I saw that in my Black perspective. I saw white people being as ruthless to one another, that is rich whites versus poor whites, as white people are generally to Black people in the ghetto. And I saw this on display in Boone. It was incredible that you had this society where basically there's an underclass of white people who are basically serving as the poor black ghetto people in the cities, and they're here in Boone. But they were dying just like you would see anybody else, right? There were single mothers being recovered with their babies out of the snow during the winter because the hospitality house would be so full. And this is a rich society. You have multi-million-dollar mansions lining the mountain tops, okay? You have the 9th most successful public school in the southeastern United States located right here. So this is not a place that's scarce on resources.
Because
that
great examples, Tony, because we are not a nation of people. We're just a collection of people. that's what we are. I mean, the American flag is bogus, everything it represents, because we are not a nation. Now, I just thought of something else. The latest means of destabilization, Tony, has been our gig economy, where people are paid not through a traditional payroll system. I think, a lot
Oh,
of
the
people
subcontracting bullshit.
exactly.
That's what
So
that
they're
is.
working on the table a lot, or the subcontracting, and they're not putting into Social Security, which will undermine it and lead to its ultimate death. So, again, everything is geared towards the destabilization of our people, that everybody's on the ledge. Everybody.
And they
Nobody
sell that.
secure in any way. The whole thing of a comfortable retirement, it's as mythical as the American flag and all it represents. I'm really hitting at the flag for some reason. I don't know why, but
Well, it's the
stop
symbol,
me, Tony.
just like the cross. The cross is for Christ and Christianity. The flag is for America, and it does represent a lot of these. I mean,
Miss.
I'm saying as the God of the Hebrews did in Egypt in Moses' day, let my people go. I mean, this is truly a plantation. And you see that there are people who are my whole view of poor people changed, right? I was watching people who had 1, 2, 3 jobs. These people had multiple jobs. They're not able to pay their rent because their landlords are able to jack up the price by 10, 15% every year. I mean, think about that. How the hell can you keep up with your rent if it goes up 10, 15% every year?
Yeah.
Does your pay go up 10, 15% every year? No, you're paid $725 like it was in 1999. Or
Well, you know what was
2007
going
or
up,
whatever it
right?
was.
Well above the pace of inflation. 7% actually was higher ed costs for decades, okay? Because of the availability of FAFSA. So that led to a proliferation of, outsized student loans. In addition, healthcare costs go up 10% annually. I mean, you have to review your health insurance every year, and your coverage is generally reduced.
When I was in college, I had to house 3 homeless students because, these were people who, I was very fortunate that I grew up with parents that if I had a $500 or $1,000 crisis or whatever it may be, they were able to help me out. But these were a lot of students that didn't have those type of opportunities. And, I saw one of my black friends at Appalachian as a first generation college student, first kid in his family go to college. And he was working hard. He had 2 jobs at the time. He bought himself a car. He was, trying to manage his rent. But, he ended up losing his car. He couldn't keep up with his car payment, so he lost his car. Once he lost his car, he lost his job. Once he lost his job, he lost.
Oh, that downward spiral, yeah.
And you see that with so many people. And because there's no social safety net in our society, I mean, really, you see that people could have gotten bailed out. They just need $1,000 here or $1,000 there, and now their life is in an endless cycle of debt and down. I mean, this system is set up specifically for people to fail, and you see that the healthcare system's a scam, the credit system's a scam, the education system's a scam. I mean, what type of society says that? Forces most of the population, if you don't have an education, most of the job market is locked off to you. But in order to get that education, you have to get exuberant loans with 3.6% interest rate, baby. And that can just go up at any time. So you have this absurd situation where college kids, people who are 18 years old, are entering in these lifelong contracts with 3.6% interest. And listen, I'm an investor. If I'm getting 3% interest on, that's not a stutter of a stock, but that's better than getting any bank account. And you're getting this on $40,000, $60,000 a year. Are you freaking kidding me? I mean, so in no time, these shark loans that they're giving 18 and 20-year-olds can just run away. It's really a perilous.
Well, I mean, there's estimates of 20 million people that are about to be evicted that have been held back by a moratorium on evictions. Okay. Now, if you include those who are in mortgage forbearance, you're talking up to 40 million Americans will be essentially facing homelessness shortly. In the meantime, you've got commercial real estate's been devastated because of the shutting down of small businesses. And those who do decide to retain their shop storefronts will probably carry a skeletal crew, thereby not needing as much space. Now, you'd think that these owners of these strip malls, I mean, they're wealthy, they make a lot of money, they might survive this. But the problem is they're all leveraged out because no one's ever happy with what you made last year. You got to make 20% more. So what you do is you leverage out, you buy other strip malls, and you're totally exposed. So the whole commercial real estate market
this is going to be
collapse.
a buying frenzy. This is the sharks are being fed fresh meat. That's what's going on right now. Small business in America is being devoured. These
being
are the
devoured.
sharks that,
They're the ones that hire people. So it's welcome to the gig economy, folks. That's going to grow. You know, the non-payroll based economy. Therefore, you're not participating in Social Security. I mean, this is just the beginning, Tony. I mean, we're facing huge economic devastation. And again, our economic system is based on people living on the edge or the ledge or whatever way we want to put it. And again, it's not just a political system; it's an economic system. It's all based on failure for the majority.
well, Paul, I hate to say this, but of course we're not going to solve this all tonight. You know, the woes
And
that
we've
we
gone
face,
over, time wise.
the woes that we face as a country are really despicable and deplorable in every sense of the word. But I really do appreciate this talk, this dialogue, and you know, hopefully we ruffled some people up because that's what we need. We need people to be angry. You know, the famous line is, "I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore."
Right.
So, you know, with that said, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Sandy, for having this venue for us, and thank you, our audience, for tuning in tonight. At the
Absolutely.
Environmental
Thanks,
Podcast.
everybody.
Incentive is as often a killer as it is anything else. So that the question, can we do better than a profit motive driven society, is a very good, healthy, and honest question. And banishing it is somewhere between stupid and evil.
You have an elite that severs themselves from reality. Remember that the oligarchs who now control both our financial and political system don't live in America. They live in a bubble of their own creation. A New Yorker writer called it Richistan. There's no check.
want to destroy this country.